podcast that provides fact, not fiction, as it regards America, whether domestically or internationally. And like everything, there's a lot going on in the world, and especially right now, the chaos that's going on in Washington about who's going to run or who's going to be the next Speaker of the House and Representatives. But before we get started, let me introduce my two famous co-hosts. There's Big Bad Joe Bitts, former combat Marine who was wounded in Iraq. Because like I always say, he stepped on something he probably shouldn't have. But he's all right physically. I don't know about mentally, but he's there. And then there's There's Ray Krause, retired Marine. So we got basically three veterans talking about issues facing America. So how's it going, guys?
Good. How are you doing?
Great,
So
John.
you've been talking a lot to me about this whole debacle in Washington. I mean, what is your impression about this? Who's going to be the next Speaker of the House of Representatives now that the Republicans are in control, even if for five members?
Okay, what I was kind of coming across, does it show weakness in our country if we can't establish who we want as a speaker?
No, some could say yes. It shows how America is devolving into chaos. But just because the Republicans take over doesn't mean someone's anointed to be the next speaker.
I know it was kind of brazen of him to move his stuff in before he was even elected. Like that's and I think isn't Matt Gaetz kind of like trying to file an eviction or something like that?
I mean, Matt Gaetz he's part of the Freedom Caucus. He talks a lot, but he doesn't produce much results. I think it's also healthy because I talked to a friend of mine he's a demographer and follows these political trends for his business. And he thought it was a healthy thing. And I was like, what? Then I started when he was speaking, I thought it is a good thing because now the Republicans get to think about what do they stand for? Because remember, during the midterms, we were told there's going to be this red wave.
Mm-hmm.
And the Republicans kept complaining about how bad Joe Biden is, and there's a lot of element to that when more than 65% of the country thinks we're on the wrong direction. But then again, they could never say, well, what are you for? I mentioned to him about 3-4 weeks prior to the midterms, the National Report Card for Education came out and said our scores plummeted, a big result of COVID, but it also showed even before COVID, our numbers were down.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, okay, this is where the Republicans are going to come out with all these commercials regarding. They didn't come out with one.
So Trump came on. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Ray.
All right. Sky Angel 1964. I'll be with you right in a second. Beach Baby 226 said, after 6 attempts, wouldn't one just want to just step back?
She makes a good point. That is a good point. I mean, after at some point, you're not going to get the speakership. Maybe it should be for the good of not just the party, but good for the country, is step back.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the names the Freedom Caucus was floating was Byron Donalds. He's a Republican congressman from Naples, Florida, and incidentally happens to be African American. They floated him.
I want him.
Potential. So, and I've looked at potential Speaker of the House. I looked up his background, and he has a pretty good resume. He does a lot of stuff in business. He went to the University of Florida. He was raised by a single mom. I think he can be more relatable to a great swath of the country. And this would put the Democrats in a kind of a bind because right now Cori Bush, the firebrand progressive lawmaker from St. Louis, said, oh, he's not an inspiration. It's like a pathetic choice, equating him with being the puppet of white nationalism or white supremacy.
So why don't we go over to Sky Angel, baby?
Okay.
Or Sky Angel 1964.
Yes.
Nice tagline. I like that.
So she said, but do you understand that they all moved into an office? They have to do that. So they have, and then she continues on, a lot of them did that, look that up. He was not the only one, and I'm assuming it's the Kevin McCarthy moving into this.
No, I think she makes a good point. I think she's correct. They do this knowing that they haven't been sworn in. Kevin McCarthy is the leader of the Republican Party when they were in the minority, so they just move in until nobody right now is official. Because you don't have a speaker, so you can't swear anybody in. You can't get any business down. So I would say she's absolutely correct. They just moved in because he was going to be the potential speaker. So it's just a more formality. If it doesn't happen, then Kevin McCarthy would have to vacate that office, and the new speaker would come in.
Now, is Trump a pro-McCarthy kind of guy, or is he just kind of wants the Republicans in, or just to kind of hash it out? Because I'm kind of on the side of like that's the small party kind of breaking off and wanting to meet demands that they kind of set aside a few months ago, and they're like, and kind of like, yeah, we'll look into this kind of stuff like that. I think there needs to be like a deal made within the Republicans because, we're looking at this as we're doing this for our people as well.
See, now I don't know if Trump was a McCarthy person. That I don't know. You can only ask Donald Trump. I think he's looking at where the longer this holds up, or we don't get a speaker, it puts the issues that the country needs to focus on in the back burner, and then you can't get a lot of the investigations that the Republicans also want to look at. So there's twofold. You can't investigate, and you can't help get the country moving again, like on the economy, on gas prices, on immigration, on anything, because you can't get anybody seated. Nobody's been sworn in. So right now we're at a stalemate. Nothing can get done.
They passed a $1.7 trillion
Correct,
budget.
but that had nothing to do with Kevin McCarthy.
No, but he was the one who voted for it.
Kevin McCarthy did not vote for that. No.
That is actually a good question that Ray brings up, is that can we see who's voting for what?
Yeah, that's easy. There's different websites you can go to that can say who voted for.
So
now, for the omnibus bill that passed, there was, I think, 16 Republicans that voted for it. Some of them surprised me. Like one of them was Tom Cotton, the conservative senator from Arkansas. I was kind of really shocked that he did, because he tends to be conservative fiscally as well as on every other issue. So I was surprised he went that way. Others, not so much. A lot of them who are retiring or moving on, they voted for it. In the House, the 9 that voted for it were typically those who were leaving anyway, and I think this was their last little stab in the dark. But on other things, you have to look at some of the spending, which I can see from the Freedom Caucus. We did the infrastructure bill, which was a big boondoggle. It's not going to fix America's infrastructure. You had the CHIPS bill, and then you had the Inflation Reduction Act that I don't think, remember right, no Republican voted for that, because that was just a big giveaway and did nothing. Even nobody right now is saying it's helping reduce inflation.
So other than McCarthy, who would you think would be a good speaker? Ray and I were kind of going back and forth about Jim Jordan, but I think he'd be more valuable as like the pit bull that he is when it comes to.
I think Jim Jordan would have been a good speaker, but I think he really wants to. He's going to chair the Judiciary Committee. So this is when they're going to look at some of these key investigations that were never investigated by the Democrats. To be honest, I would like to see Byron. I mean, right now, if it's between McCarthy, if he's not it, then there's Steve Scalise. He's the next one down from there, and then. But maybe Byron Donaldson can bring a fresh face to the Republican Party and should bring a different look, because if you look at the last couple elections beginning in 2016, as much as people want to bemoan Donald Trump, he's flipped the party, meaning they used to be the party of big business, corporate America, the country club. Now the Republican Party is the party of the working class. If you made less than $100,000 or if you didn't go to college, you're typically a Republican. And then for some of the ethnic groups, like the last 3 election cycles, if you start 2016, Republicans gain more of the African-American vote, the Hispanic vote, the Asian vote, because now we need to cater to issues that Americans cater about. And I think education is one of the big key points. That's what got Ron DeSantis in the governorships in 2018, and also Brian Kemp in Georgia.
So does this kind of like show it's going to be a little bit of a rocky start for the Republicans now that they kind of can't agree on who to represent not only them but the House.
I think it is a rough start. It depends how they handle it. Eventually, they're going to come to a speaker and mention. Maybe the one point that was brought up is that if Kevin McCarthy is on his 5th, 6th, and 7th vote and he's not getting it, maybe it's just say, okay, for the best of the party and best for the country, let me step down. I'll still be in the Congress. I can have some voice or some role to play in the Republican majority. Maybe give it to somebody else. And we have seen it in the past. Sometimes you think a candidate or a person is going to be the perfect choice, and someone comes up and surprises you. So maybe there's going to be a surprise, whether it's Steve Scalise, who I think is the minority whip in the Republican Party in the House, or it could be, but maybe the Republican Party needs that fresh face of Byron Donalds.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's just.
So I like Byron Donald. I like Steve Scalise. I really don't think McCarthy did that much within the first 2 years. But you also have to look at it like he was kind of tied, especially with the Democrats kind of controlling the House. But like, is the speaker, even though he might, even though he's going to be a Republican, is he going to be very involved in what Biden or with our president, or is it just because you saw Nancy Pelosi and Schumer kind of like at his side, and you always saw President Trump kind of talking to Schumer and Pelosi
because they control their party.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have to, like right now, before the midterms, Biden was very involved with Pelosi and Schumer because they controlled both the House and the Senate. Well, if President Biden wants anything to get done, he's going to have to deal with the Republican Speaker of the House. He's just going to have to.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the one thing that the Republicans can do, you can pass all the bills you want. The Senate probably won't take them up or pass them, but you can neuter some of the things they're doing. You can hold the executive agencies, like this whole debacle with the airlines and Southwest.
Yeah,
I was talking with your wife, and she mentioned some people that she knew. It was an utter disaster. So the question, okay, yeah, we got it. There should be accountability. What did Southwest do with the $7 billion? But then there's also accountability for Pete Buttigieg, the Secretary of Transportation, because Ro Khanna, the Democratic progressive congressman from California, wrote him a letter saying, this is in September. There's problems with the aviation system. We had problems in December of 2021. We had problems last summer, and we had problems again. So the question for Pete Buttigieg is, what are you doing? We know the vacations you're taking.
Yeah.
We know you went on a military flight to the Netherlands on a trip. So what are you doing to solve these problems?
Yeah.
And it shows he's out of his element. There's other cabinet secretaries. You have Secretary Granholm, Secretary of Energy. You have Javier Becerra, the Secretary of Health and Human Services. You really haven't heard of, and we've had a pandemic and some of these other issues. So there are things that the Republicans can do, and then be in control of the committees. They have oversight to find out, what do we know about Hunter Biden? Look at the scandal that's going on with Twitter, releasing all the information showing the government throughout our national security agents, from the FBI, CIA, the Director of National Intelligence, to members of Congress like Adam Schiff, getting with Twitter to shut down different accounts.
So
that's free speech. It's against free speech.
Is Matt Gaetz kind of like maybe stirring the pot just to get somebody else other than McCarthy? Because
it could be. I don't know what's going on through Matt Gaetz' thing. I just wish they would have done this.
But it seems to be growing. Ray noticed that it went from what did it start off with, Ray? People that weren't voting for McCarthy.
I think it started voted at 5 or something.
Then it went to 20.
Yeah.
Then it went to 10, then 11. Now we're up to 20.
The only thing I wish they would have done, once they knew the Republicans had the House of Representatives, I wish they would have done it then. Hey, listen, we're never going to vote for you. I wish the other 15 would have, because we knew it was 5 all the way up until just last week.
Mm-hmm.
I wish we would have had these other 15. If you didn't like Kevin McCarthy, and I hate to use this term, I know you guys are a little bit more adjective on your podcast.
Go
I
for
wish
it.
they would have had the balls enough to stand up and said, I don't support Kevin McCarthy. I won't support him. So then maybe they could have hashed this out prior to taking over officially the House on the 3rd.
Yeah.
And we could have avoided all this. Because you got to remember, it's not what's best for the Republican Party. It was how does this help the American people?
Yeah, and then wouldn't Steve Scalise kind of be a little bit better suited for that?
It
Since,
could be. I mean,
or even who was the other person?
Byron Donalds.
Byron Donalds. I mean, I see. Okay, Byron Donald, I see kind of like a Republican, kind of Republicans putting him up as like an FU to Democrats. Like, not only did we, put the first black speaker there, but he's a Republican, and that's
But see,
sending a clear message.
It is, but see, I think the Republicans are different. Republicans don't. I mean, this is where people can fault me on this one. I'm sure I'll probably get questions on this one. Republicans don't look at a minority just to say, oh, let's put up the black guy, so that was put on the thumb in the eye.
No, the Democrats do.
Democrats look at race at everything they do.
Mm-hmm.
Even though they say they're not racist.
Because look at Cori Bush. She said about Byron Donalds. She just he's just another face of white supremacy. I mean, really?
Yeah.
Has anybody looked at the city of St. Louis and how crime-ridden it is? So if she's so big on taking care of black lives, why do 70 to almost 80% of black children in St. Louis can't do math or English to grade level? I don't hear her talking about that.
Look at them. Look at what they did to Larry Elder.
Yeah, the wide face of white supremacy. Here's a guy that went.
That's an actual article.
Yeah, from the L.A. Times. Larry Elder went to Crenshaw High, one of the worst high schools in California, if not the nation, and he ran against a white, progressive, elitist individual who was born into wealth his whole life, married into wealth, supported by wealth, but yet the black candidate is the face of white supremacy and white privilege.
We had a school up in Michigan wanted to change its name because it was named after Ben Carson, which was a predominantly black school, and you're like, this is someone we don't want representing us. Yeah, a black brain surgeon
who grew up in poverty,
Yeah.
and his mother only had a 3rd grade education. Yeah, and this is a guy that rose to the top of the pinnacle
Mm-hmm.
of his profession as a neurological doctor.
Yeah, but I think when it comes down to it, we just want somebody that represents America and does what's best for America,
Exactly.
whether I agree with it or not.
Because we all 3 came in the military.
Yeah.
The one person who mentored me because I love politics and foreign policy, and we always talked these issues, had a long conversation, was a colonel I served with when I was in Afghanistan, who happened to be African American. And I talked to a gentleman today at work, and I work at a law enforcement supply company, and I go, but the thing is, what I was telling him, when I'm in the military, when I was in Iraq, and Joe, you were in combat in Iraq as well,
Mm-hmm.
when we were getting shot at, I didn't look around to say, well, I can't be next to him, he's black.
Yeah.
I didn't care if you're black, white, or come from Pluto.
Isn't that kind
as
of
long as you're getting me home, color means nothing. So I don't look at it that way.
I have a question.
Here
You
it
don't
comes.
have to answer this, but the blunt report, Ben Carson equals Sambo sellout. Can you explain to me how he's a sellout?
I don't get that. I don't see.
But
how
isn't it? But hold on, isn't that whole term racist in itself?
That's racist in itself.
Yeah.
But I mean, look at Ben Carson. Did he grow up in wealth? No. Did he have wealthy parents? No. Was his parents well educated? No. His mom only had a 3rd grade education. So how is he a sellout because he wants individual opportunities? He's also been talking about education as a pinnacle that got him ahead. His mother pushed his brothers and sister get an education, pushed him to read. How is that being a sellout?
Yeah.
What does Ben Carson have to be? Be in the prison, the criminal justice system as a prisoner? Does he have to be a single parent, having children outside of wedlock? Is that what he's trying to push?
And then Beach Baby 226 says it would be nice to have politicians, regardless of party, not beholden to lobbyists.
No, I would.
Yeah,
That's a plus.
that would be great.
Well, here's an example. Follow the political leaders and staffers once they leave Washington. They go right back into the lobbying arm that they regulated. So if they were in charge of banking, they go right and be a lobbyist or a lawyer for the banking industry.
So is Nancy Pelosi technically still the speaker?
No.
I mean, she hasn't handed the gavel over.
That's just a mere formality. We don't have a speaker right now.
Okay.
She's done.
So, and you know what? There's the big question. I know we're going to get a little bit rallying up going on here, but can our once president, Donald J. Trump, be Speaker of the House?
Now, that's a good question because I remember one time it was asked here before, and I said no because he's not a member of the House.
Mm-hmm.
Was listening to Fox, but I think they might be wrong. I believe you have to be a member of the House of Representatives to be selected as Speaker. I don't think you can pick someone outside the body because you're not a member of the body.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Fox was wrong on that one. I'm not sure who said it. And I just know I heard that on Fox News. I just don't remember what show or what program or who said it.
Just one sec. Kim 3414. Why is it based on money raised? Are you talking about running for office? I'm going to see if she can get back on that.
You know what? But actually, that kind of brings me up a question.
Go ahead, Joe.
Well, okay. If I put like $100 million into my campaign, do I have a better chance of winning than, say, someone that's putting in like 100,000 or 200,000? Or is there kind of some kind of regulation when it goes there?
She did answer yes. So
Okay, perfect.
The question was, why is it based on money raised for running for office?
Because both of you guys have good questions on that.
Okay, answer hers first, though.
Okay, but money raised, it's when you run for public office, it takes money. And what I mean by that is when you first start, you got to file. You can either do it two ways. You can pay the fee, which is, I think it depends what state you're in, or it's usually about $10,000, or you get enough signatures, and each state, each district is different. So let's just say you have to get 5,000 signatures to not to pay that fee. But then once you run, then it depends what state you're in. Some states are more expensive. Like when I lived in California, there's 5 distinct regions, especially let's say you run for governor or U.S. Senate. There's 5 distinct regions. So you got to have money to run in Los Angeles, San Francisco, Sacramento, San Diego, and it all costs money. And these are very high expensive media markets, so they don't cover each other. Some states, one media network will cover the whole state. Now, we live in Florida, so if you run in Florida, you have to run in the Tampa media market, the Orlando media market. You go down to Miami, then you got Jacksonville, and then there's Tallahassee and Gainesville. So it does take money, and then things have changed. Before you can do direct mail, there's other things, but now with social media, you have to have a strong social media presence, and getting your message on television, that's expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So all this takes money. That's why running for the big offices takes just a lot of money. I mean, you're talking, just think take Stacey Abrams. She raised $100 million to run for her losing campaign in Georgia, far more than what Brian Kemp raised.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the presidential race, Donald Trump didn't raise as much as Joe Biden did. And then what you're saying, there are campaign laws. If you're a corporation, you can only donate so much. Then if you're an individual, you can only donate so much in a general election, and that includes the general and the primary as 2 distinct elections. Then you also have the so-called dark money, where you can donate to PACs who then can spend as much money as they want. So there's different rules, and I'm against some of the way that we're spending on elections. We're starting so early, but Like sometimes I always think I would love to run for public office, but I don't have the money that you need to get started. And everybody goes, well, it's just you got to go door knocking, you got to work. Yeah, that's true. Jeb Bush in 2016 raised a lot of money and lost. But there's also people who've raised a lot of money and won and forced out a lot of good candidates who most potentially could win. Like in 2016, one podcast we did a long time ago was who could go toe-to-toe with Donald Trump as a Democrat. And I said James Webb. James Webb couldn't get the traction, couldn't get the money, and he was out before the first primary in 2016.
Are they ever going to like maybe normalize or balance out? I think one of the things I was talking to you about earlier today was like, can we have a great reset when it comes to these politicians? Because they only seem to be after their self-interest, and I guess you can look at it like the pool is tainted. So how do we correct it? Because you're always going to have, it's almost like poisoning the well. Even though you can remove as much poison as you want, it's still
the way to get to,
I mean,
this may be a simplistic answer to that, or a way to fix the system. The way I always believe to fix it is the American people need to get more involved. And what I mean by that is they need to be better informed of what goes on. And I get this with my brother. I don't have the time to read what you read. But I follow politics probably more than most.
Mm-hmm.
But there's one site I really start with, and that's Real Clear Politics. It gives me all these tabs on energy, politics, education. There's always a conservative article and a liberal article. So I can get both sides, get an idea. Then I go do my own digging on other things. But Americans need to understand when politicians make these claims, like when Joe Biden made the claim, I'm not going to tax anybody making $400,000 or less. Well, that doesn't make sense because most of the money is below that.
Mm-hmm.
You can tax the wealthy all you want to oblivion. You're never going to get all the money you need unless you go after the middle class.
And even though like 400,000, I mean, that's like, isn't that like the threshold for the 1%?
Yeah, but I mean, okay, then you go to the other part that needs to be changed is, and we're seeing it with this Twitter release, is the media. Now, there's also, when I wrote an article a while back about, I asked a friend, is there a Hippocratic oath regarding the media? Like do you have with the doctors? When the doctors, it's medical professions, do no harm. Well, in the media, they have an ethics code. And if you read the bullet points of that, our media today has violated every single one.
Yeah, they're not held to that standard.
And the one thing is, the number one is stand by the accuracy of your reporting. And speed is not a substitute for sloppiness.
Yeah.
How do you deal with sources? And then the fourth paragraph has talked about be impartial. Now, we all have our biases. In one podcast, Joe, you asked me if you were given $1 million, would you back or support or any of the Republican candidates?
John would be eating fat steaks, nice house.
And not sleeping where I'm sleeping.
Yeah, but sleeping on a nice, comfortable bed.
Yeah, but I said no because I think as a reporter covering these issues, even though I lean center right, I've never ever given to the Republican Party. And I won't back a Republican candidate while I'm doing this political podcast.
Let me emphasize, John will not do that.
Yeah.
I didn't say anything about Ray or I.
Yeah, that's different. But for me, I won't do that because that taints me. If I want to cover the Republicans or Democrats, you can say, well, you're a Republican, you're giving. I go, show me one instance where I have. You look at, like, take George Stephanopoulos. When they did, he interviewed Peter Schweitzer in 2015 about the Clinton Foundation. Because he wrote a book called Clinton Cash. Yeah, I think it was Clinton Cash. And George Stephanopoulos was very tough. But what George Stephanopoulos didn't say, he donated $80,000 to the Clinton Foundation and was heavily involved in doing focus groups for him. That violated even the standards of ABC News, but he still sticks around.
Yeah.
So it goes both ways. We need the media to be less partisan, and we need the public to really understand if a politician says something that's too good to be true, it probably is a bold-faced lie. And they need to go by what Alexander Solzhenitsyn said in 1978. He was a famous Russian dissident, and he really admonished the media. He goes, who holds you accountable when you make a report on something that's not true, not factual, or you come to the wrong conclusion to push an ideological bent that you have? Who holds you accountable? Nobody. So if the media, if we're going to get our country back and on the right track addressing our needs, we got to have the media be less polarizing and less partisan, and the public has to be more knowledgeable of what's going on around them.
All right. So, are we gonna have a speaker by our next show?
Yeah, I think we'll have it by the end of the week.
Okay. So, how can he go ahead and get a hold of you, John?
Well, you can get a hold of us by going to ubaldireports at gmail.com. That's ubaldireports at gmail.com. Or check us out on all our social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and the like. Keep going that way. Let us know what you think of these shows. We're trying to just address some of the concerns, what's out there. If you have any questions, whether good, bad, or indifferent, just let us know what you think.
And we're going to do our first go-to show in a little bit, aren't we?
Yeah, we're looking at doing it at a restaurant up in a city north of Tampa, just asking people what they think. But we just want to get this information out. We really want to do this so we can do this 5 days a week, because there's always a lot of issues, and we can dissect and really break this down and present the information, and you decide what you want to do.
So, and we have Ray.
Then we have Ray, who does...
he's our more or less our Second Amendment correspondent.
And he's very knowledgeable about not only just weapons itself, very knowledgeable about the latest gun laws, firearm restrictions, or what they're trying to do, what the ATF is trying to do. So if you have knowledge on that, or the one thing I like is maybe talk to him about, if you want to buy a weapon for the first time, what should you look for and what should you not, what should you look for and what should you be wary of when going into a local firearm store. And then there's Joe, my good friend and co-host of this, and he does his own podcast to American Gunslinger, and Joe can explain what that is.
Oh, we do All American Gunslingers. We drink whiskey, smoke cigars, talk about guns, and other
Events.
nefarious things that we've done.
And they get a little bit more animated than I do.
Yeah, this is a little bit more. It's more of a spicier show than this one. So you can get us on All American Gunslingers on all social media platforms, including TikTok and Instagram, where we go live. And, you know, you can reach us at allamericangunslingers@gmail.com. So with that, we're done.
And keep listening, keep following Ubaldi Reports till next Wednesday at 7:30 Eastern Standard Time. Keep following Ubaldi Reports.